Hey everybody, we're back. It is February 7th, 8:30 p.m., and we are previewing DC United, their 2024 season. Doing every team in Major League Soccer for the previous 4 seasons, you think I would have had a little better introduction than what came out of my mouth just there. But we are live. We're talking about every team in Major League Soccer. There's 29 of them, and we're just about halfway through talking today about DC United with Ted Meyer from RFK Refugees Podcast. Ted, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where we can find your work?
Yeah, my name's Ted Meyer. I do a podcast, RFK Refugees, covering DC United, Washington Spirit. We did try to do Loudoun a little bit, but we passed that along to Next in Line, which covers Loudoun United. But we talk DC United weekly. We also dip into MLS, U.S. men's and women's national teams occasionally, but strictly talk a lot about DC. So. We've got weekly Monday shows we run right now. We're still in off-season mode, so it's kind of every 2 weeks. But once the season ramps up, I should say, we should be we'll be back to doing weekly. We also do Patreon shows, interviews, and we're even trying to get into the written word. So trying to do columns and stuff like that. So
my podcast has you can have it give you a transcription.
Yes, I think we just got that in. We just got that feature, I guess, in ours as well. So.
It's also really good at telling you how many times you say in a podcast. That is what I found about the transcription software.
My biggest thing is, and I think I got most of it out of my system, but I still occasionally dip back into it. So that was my biggest thing starting podcasting.
DC United had a very interesting season last year.
Good segue.
10-10-14 finished 12th in the East with 45 goals scored, which was tied for 8th in the East. They allowed 49 goals, which leads to a -4 differential, and they missed the playoffs last season. Yes, this slide still goes on. I have more. 4-game win streak in April was the only time they won back-to-back matches, and 1 win in the final 7 games ends their season. DC United, this is a season to forget, although it was an exciting season with some signings. The play on the field wasn't miserable. It was exciting at times. You just didn't get a lot of results that you were looking for. Ted, can you talk about 2023 for us?
Yeah, 2023, it's so difficult, I guess, to talk about the season. It felt honestly, I mean, I'm gonna be frank. It was a waste. It was just a waste of a season. Was it as bad as 2022 is on the field? No, but I mean, it again sort of coming into this year. We had Wayne Rooney as head coach. He was gonna be here for the year with an option for next year. Basically, both sides had to agree. There I go again. Now I'm going to be talking about it constantly, but the play on the field had some good moments. Benteke scoring goals. They had a nice little run in April, but it really was just a year that just never felt settled. I mean, case in point, one player you don't have on this list, but was here for like a few months was Lewis O'Brien, and that literally his whole signing that year, I thought, just encompassed DC United as a whole, which is just lack of long-term thinking, really just concerned with, what the next season's going to look like, how the next season's going to look like. No real deep thought or deep plan. And it really, I think, culminated in what we're seeing now in 2024, which is new GM, new coach. The whole front office has been cleaned out. Even some people that I really liked, the chief scout for the team, for instance, was, always willing to come on the show. A really, really engaging and entertaining guest. He's gone. They're really kind of sort of starting from ground zero. Now they can't do that with the roster, and we'll get into that in a minute because they've got contracts. So it's not a total cleansing, but it is. I mean, there's a lot of cleansing that's going on in this.
And this team looks a lot different than last season for sure.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Let's talk about some of the contributors for the 2023 season as far as the offense goes. Christian Benteke, 14 goals, 3 assists. Then you had Taxiarchis Fountas with 6 goals. Ted DiPietro with 5 goals, 2 assists. Klitsch with 4 goals and 7 assists. And Chris Durkin, who is now gone, 3 goals and 2 assists. This is very top heavy, but you have a couple contributors who really made a difference on the field. And, at least 3 of them will be returning for 2024.
Yeah, we have Christian Benteke back. We have Mateus Klick back. We don't need to go into the Taxi Funtas saga. Just Google him and DC United, and you'll see what happened there. Klick, both these designated players when they came in, I think particularly Benteke had a very, very rough end to 2022. I don't think he will, when he leaves, I don't think he'll be viewed as a legend in this club. I mean, unless he goes on a miraculous golden boot run this year. I mean, you never say never in MLS, but I don't think he'll be viewed as a legend. But he put together, I thought, an incredibly solid season. If you had told people at the beginning of 2023, hey, he's going to have 14 goals this year, I think most fans would have jumped up and said, oh my gosh, we got to be like killing it right now. But he still is shown to be an effective goal scorer. He will win everything out of the air. If the ball's up in the air, very few players are going to go at him, going to go out and grab him. And Mateus Klick again came in. I feel like his numbers, I'll be very curious to see, because they originally had him sort of playing the number 10. And I think Wayne Rooney quickly realized he's not a number 10. We've got to rethink our whole structure and organization.
And when Wayne Rooney tells you someone's not a number 10, you listen to Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he's definitely more of an 8, more of a shuttler, sort of deep behind the ball. That's why they've gone out and gotten Gabriel Pirani to be that sort of number 10. So I feel like he had he scored an incredible goal against TFC, had kind of a mixed start to the season. I thought towards the close of the season, you started to see a little bit more from him, and it started to reflect more in the numbers. And then you have Ted DiPietro, arguably the breakout player from last season, had a really strong preseason in 2023, and then subs onto the field in the opening game. Registers a game-winning assist to Christian Benteke, game-tying assist to Christian Benteke, and then scores the game winner in that game. And really, sort of as the year went on, you look at young players and you see that first flash, and you're like, oh, that's great. And then you either see them not really see it again, or they kind of stay at the same level. We'll maybe talk about one player that I think has sort of suffered from that a little bit. Or they start to develop, and every game you see like a new part of their game that maybe you didn't see last week, that you start to see it. And that's what we saw with Ted DiPietro. He should be the starter coming into this year. He certainly deserves it. He's getting, looks at he was at the Pan America games. So really, really incredible breakout season from him, and a guy I think a lot of the fan base. He's also being talked about as captain. Troy Lesesne named him as one of the potential captains, and he had the captain's armband for at least part of the one of the preseason games that they've had.
Great. So we've already kind of covered the MVP, Christian Benteke. We expected that. It came to fruition. Overperformance, let's give it to Ted DiPietro.
Absolutely.
Who underperformed in 2023? Who's your top underperformer? I don't want to say who underperformed, because this is only a half-hour show.
Yeah, this is harsh, potentially, and it was probably Gabriel Pirani. Just the expectations of coming in as a number 10. He kind of passes a little bit of the eye test. Like, I think fans kind of warmed up to him. We're trying to project Lucho Acosta onto him a little bit. But he struggled, and he didn't really produce very much. The team is sort of bringing him back. Tom Bogart originally reported they were discussing a loan. His parent contract was owned by Santos, a loan for this year. He was loaned in last year, but it was going to be an extension of that loan into the summer. But then Santos got relegated, and I think Santos said, look, either pay us now or we'll take him back. And he'll probably we'll find the Brazilian team that'll take him for maybe more money, or we're going to have we'll use him for our Brazilian B campaign to get back to the top Brazilian league. So I think Mackay looked at it and said, either we lose this guy, and then, I think also he was like, I don't really have an idea for a number 10 that we could bring in. He's already comfortable. It's a bit of a risk, small risk, but we'll bring him back, and hopefully he can have a better year in 2024.
One thing I did notice about him is that he only had like 10 games, 800 minutes, something like that. So especially when you consider that Major League Soccer is a much faster game than than the way that the game is played in Brazil. When you consider some of the different, the struggles of settling in, being 21 years old, out of the country kind of for the first time. Maybe there's a little bit of grace to be had there for his slow start.
And I would also add, he came in right as, it wasn't evident, I guess, to the general public, but based on, I guess, the mood that you could sort of tell with the team and how things kind of faded down the stretch. They all kind of knew, Rooney was gone. I don't think they knew Rooney wasn't coming back. There was going to be a new coach at the helm. Rooney also, his attitude, to me, it was almost reminiscent of his sort of last season at DC, where you could just tell that he didn't really have the same real fire and care. It was just like going through the motions and just trying to close out the year. So I think that sort of played a role in maybe why he maybe didn't look as good. So I think it's appropriate to give him a fresh start, fresh coach. You would think he would get a preseason, but he's with the Brazilian U23s in the Commonwealth pre-Olympic tournament. So maybe have to extend that grace period a little bit because he hasn't had an opportunity for a preseason with DC.
At least he's out. At least he's out playing though, So it's good for that.
We're going to hit some incoming and outgoing players in just a second, but we do have a question here. What role will Pirani play in 2024? I assume it's going to be the everyday number 10.
Yeah, it's most likely going to be that number 10. We don't really know what Lassane's formation is going to be. I am projecting a 3-5-2 kind of based on some of what I've been looking at the lineups and how they've sort of lined up. But it is my expectation that he will be that number 10. And, they will maybe look to the summer if it's not working out, finding someone else. I think he might still have a little bit of a short leash. They might be for the entirety of the year, knowing that you then now will have two open DP slots with Click and Benteke in the last years of their contract.
Let's talk about some incoming and outgoing players. Now, we talked about Gabriel Pirani. He is now an official DC United player. You also picked up Aaron Herrera, and that was from, I believe it was a team we just talked about very recently, Montreal. You got Jared Stroud, journeyman from the Red Bull system, who I think might have played in like youth or something with Troy Lassane. He spent a year in St. Louis, new club. Very midfielder, leaves a little to be desired on the defensive side of the ball. And you picked up Matti Peltola. Talk to us a little bit about him, because I think that's the interesting one here.
Yeah, so I actually, if you're interested in learning more, I sat down and he played for HJK Helsinki in Finland. The Finnish league is not anywhere that I know to stream, but there was a conference league match, his sort of last match for HJK, where he played against Aberdeen in the conference league. And I actually sat down, I took a look just to see what type of player this was. Because I'm not watching the Finnish league. I think very few people are. If you listen to a lot of the talking heads in MLS media, they literally probably have no idea who this guy is. He is a defensive midfielder. But I left that game. I watched that game. And again, it's Aberdeen in the Scottish league, not the highest quality opponent. But he played as kind of he played actually in the back line as sort of a third center back. I wrote in the piece about how that was actually a little bit intriguing to me, because this team, one of the players you see listed here, Andy Nahar, played as kind of that third sort of, roaming center back. He doesn't quite have the sauce that he has, but he is very good at the press. He's definitely willing to get forward. He can, certainly at speed, running at speed, he can beat players on the dribble. He's very pacey, covers a ton of ground. TotalFootballAnalysis.com had a piece on him, and his heat map he is literally all over the field. So he's a guy who's going to roam. It sounds like, based on, what Goff has said, what Troy Lassane has said, what Matty has said himself, is that he sees himself more as a defensive midfielder. I think this is a guy who was on a free contract, a free agent. So there was no transfer fee to pay. He's going in as a young designated player. I have to imagine that, you don't have to factor in a transfer fee into any of that. It's just whatever his salary is. I imagine he's getting paid pretty well. He was being chased by some Italian and French teams. So there certainly was some interest elsewhere. I think DC probably convinced them. They said, look, you come here, there's, this is part of a rebuilding project. You're going to get minutes. You're going to get a chance to play. You go to Europe, and you also can still showcase yourself. And it doesn't preclude you from making maybe an even bigger move into Europe if you're successful here. So, I think that's what they sold him on how to come here. It sounds like he wants to play defensive midfield. I think we'll see him roam. He can certainly ping a ball. He had an assist in the game against Aberdeen. He's not afraid to push forward. This was a very intriguing signing. I left away feeling very impressed. And I think the move for the roster serves the young designated player. You can now keep your full complement of U22 slots out there. Imagine the salary's not too high. So if he does become a designated player, if he's worth it and he's on that salary, he's also on a 4-year contract too. They pretty much locked him down for, a fairly long time. So, I mean, they bet a lot on this guy to come here. So, and I'm interested to see he's with the team in Saudi Arabia right now. So very curious to see once he takes the field, because I'm maybe a little bit high on him after watching that game, which was probably his best game of the year. But that's where I land.
This midfield could really get singing really, really quickly. Some outgoing players here. You have Chris Durkin, Derek Williams. It's apparently not the only person in DC who can't keep their big, stupid, racist mouth shut. You got Donovan Pines on his way out, Andy Nahar, and Ruan. Do any of those actually make your team worse this year?
We pretty much replaced, I guess you could say, Andy Nahar and Ruan with Herrera. Taxi, I will talk about Taxi Fundos just because, he, despite everything that happened, when he was on the field, he was a pretty
incredibly skilled.
Yeah, a pretty effective player for DC. So, I mean, you are losing a lot because that's a designated player that you've now replaced with a defensive player. Everyone else, Derek Williams was good. He was also expensive. He was on $700,000, $800,000. Chris Durkin, he's sort of a polarizing player amongst DC fans. I really liked him. Of course, I've spent a lot of time in Richmond, no longer living in Richmond, but he played a lot for the Kickers. He was, a fixture at those games. And so I had a little special place in my heart because he played for the Kickers for a little bit while he was, developing in DC. A lot of people on that list, I think they trimmed a lot of fat. I think Ron was fine. He could do some things, but I don't think he's as good as Herrera. But really, I think they really, I have to commend, because that was my big question when Mackay came in was, all right, is this going to be kind of a transitional year and then we cut the fat, or are we going to start doing it now? And he's getting right to work. He did not waste any time with that roster. They only exercised one option on their contract, and that was Russell Knaus. Wow. And Teku DiPietro, sorry, but he was a given.
So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to see on the field as far as actual strategy, formation. Now, Troy Lesane, we know what he is. He coached Red Bull last year. He's league average for a young coach. He did some things well. We know he's in the Red Bull system, so it's going to be pressing, counter, press, counter, that kind of thing. Troy Lesane was not quite as rigid as someone like Chris Armas in the system. He was able to make some adjustments. You saw him adjust last year in the playoffs against Charlotte, and it left Charlotte in a place where they couldn't do anything. They had no plan B. And all Troy did was he just pressed one half of the field and not the other half. And, he absolutely panched Charlotte. So he has grown a little bit as a coach. He's a great locker room guy, no one has anything negative personally to say about him, and he could be really helpful to this squad. What have you learned so far in preseason?
I mean, I think the biggest thing, you talk about him as a Red Bull guy. I maybe have a little bit of an issue with that because, he does have head coaching experience. He was the head coach at New Mexico United in the USL before that. We can argue about the quality of the league, but I think that's sort of where he got his start. There are different sort of very varying ways to press. I would contend that, he was given the lineup he was given at Red Bull. He, from what I've heard and what others have told me, really no help was given to him. And I can't recall really any major signings that were made that made a significant difference. I think you highlighted sort of helping the young guys. We got a lot of young guys on this team. Teku DiPietro, Christian Fletcher, Matei Akambone, particularly Jackson Hopkins as well. I think this team had probably as close after 10 years after Andy Nahar and Bill Hamid were their first homegrown signings. And we all thought, oh my goodness, DC is going to revolutionize youth players. It was nothing for 10 years. And then suddenly we got this big influx of players, and it's been mixed results. Of course, Kevin Paredes is out at Wolfsburg, tearing up. He was a DC homegrown. Tecudo Pietro started to develop. But really, there have been others as well. Griffin Yow's now in Belgium, but didn't really make a statement here in DC. DC sold him pretty cheap. Now they might get something on the back end. So I think bringing in a guy in like Lassane, hearing that he wants to work with youth players and is good at developing youth players is insanely attractive to me, because we have a lot of players. And one guy I don't even have on this is Jeremy Garea, who's been sort of just languishing on Loudoun United. And I think based on the lack of depth that they've sort of brought in, I think they want to at least see what they have with him. So, I'm excited to see if he can sort of take this immense amount of talent that, is garnering attention. Akambone had offers from Atletico Madrid. Fletcher went off to Swansea, played for the U21s, but like immediately just tore that up. And then also we signed Jacob Murrell as well, who's had a pretty good start to the preseason as well. So getting those young players going, developing them, I think is a move. And I think we're starting to see that start to become the identity for DC. And I have wanted so bad for so long for them to establish this identity. We're not going to outspend, the LAs and the New Yorks of the world. We have an incredible base of talent here in the DMV. And I think we should be trying to look to maximize that however we can and become basically what Philly does. I'm insanely jealous of what Philly does. And I think, it's a model that I think that works pretty well in DC, because we talk about a lot of the guys that we've sort of developed, the Alex Ovechkins, the John Walls and the Bradley Beals, even if their stints weren't successful, those players develop. And even at DC too, like we talk about, Andy Nahar, and we talk about Bill Hamid, because they were homegrowns who came up in our system. And so
sure.
I'm excited to see if that starts to come to fruition for this team.
So we expect there to be a 3 or 5 man back line, and that's actually when I think Red Bulls kind of played the best last year. And I expect that to be a little bit in the high pressing system. You have 2 fullbacks who are going to need to get upfield, so we're not really calling them fullbacks. I know you said 5 man midfield. I kind of say 5 man back line, very similar. But what I do think is I think we can lock up the top 5 guys. Right, Benteke and DiPietro are gonna be the 2 strikers. Pirani is gonna be the number 10, and Click and Peltola. If these guys don't play 3,500 minutes this year, it's gonna be a disappointment. So I think you're gonna lock those guys in every single week. If they're healthy, put them on the field. Do you agree for those? At least top 5 on the field there.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, don't count Russell Knaus to step in. He's been a very, very solid number 6 for us. But I think also he had an Ironman season last year for probably the first time since he's arrived here in DC. But he struggles to stay healthy. So I would expect, Patola's been brought in here to be the player to play that role. And I imagine Mohamed Jaz, who's sort of our left wing back, I would expect him to play. He's been hurt. He was hurt all last year. He's starting to get back to fitness. He's healthy. He's in training. Seems to be in good spirits. He's a player that I think they brought in thinking would be would play a larger role in this year than he ended up playing. So hopefully he can stay healthy and get in. And then also Rodriguez over there on the right side. I was kind of like iffy on the right side of the field. You would think Herrera would play that, but
yeah,
from what I've seen, it seems like maybe they're going to try to use him as sort of and again, there's very little history on this team. It could be completely different come kickoff time. I was stabbing in the dark on some of these.
With the high press system, you could see that. You could see Herrera slide over mid game, and now he's playing right back in a 4-man back line. Slides in, Rodriguez slides over, and maybe he'll play like a number 6 when he's not doing that. We do know a little bit about Troy Lassane because of how he treated the Red Bull last year with Tolkien and Kyle Duncan, his wingers, that he loved getting upfield. And they were playing a 4-man back line, making some real risks running up and down the field. So I think these fullbacks are going to play a huge part in your system this year. Let's talk about behind the ball now. You got 3 center backs, McVeigh, Birnbaum, Herrera. We're calling him a center back for our purposes today. And then behind him, Alex Bono. Let's talk about this spine here, this defense.
Yeah, it's a mix of, there's a lot of young talent and serviceable talent, I'd say, with Bartlett and McVeigh, particularly the young talent in Akambone. I would not be surprised, Akambone's now got Atletico Madrid knowing that he's wanted by them. DC turned down the offer. I have to think DC is going to start to try to say, hey, you're going to get minutes. You're going to get opportunities this year. Don't worry about it. And they got to make good on that. Otherwise, he's going to start to wonder, why didn't you guys sell me if you weren't going to play me? I mean, Birnbaum's 33. He's certainly getting up there. I have him listed in as the starter. I would not be surprised if this could potentially be his maybe start to be the tail end of his career where his minutes get cut. He's played a lot when he's been healthy. He's basically been a penned-in starter. But I think I would not be surprised if the team maybe looks to, sunset him a little bit. And, they've, like you said, they brought in McVay, they brought in a lot of different players. So that's maybe the one spot where it's probably, if I had to pick a weak point, it's probably that, because there's just not a lot of assignment, and goalkeeper as well. I have Bono in as a starter just because he played really, I thought, pretty well down the stretch, all things considered. Miller, I think, suffered from Rooney tactics in that he, was forced to push up because the team had no pace and no speed. And so it was like, we need to just pin teams back. So go up, and it was fine for a little bit. And then teams started to cue in on it. And I think he suffered a little bit of a confidence hit. So I think DC is going to play a little differently than they did last year. So maybe he steps back in. But it could really either be Bono or Miller in goal, but definitely defense is going to be potentially a weak point this year.
Yeah. One thing that I was looking at and seeing is sort of that, I guess you can say it's that uncertainty, because it's like, if you are expecting Herrera to play as a center back, like, he's not really a center back. He's a fullback. He doesn't really have like the skill set mentality of a center back. So it's like, if you guys are depending on him there, like, you're going to be into your depth real quick. If you play him as like as a fullback, as a wing back, he's a physical monster. But I guess it just makes me think about sort of the depth of this team, because it seems like there are a few risks, not just in the back line, but all over the field. Mm-hmm. Right? You're counting on the back line to kind of stay healthy and for players to fit in. In the midfield, you're counting on Peltola and Pirani to really kick off. We're counting on Benteke and Click, who, by the way, played far and away the most minutes on this team at like 32 and 33 years old. They're both 33 this year until June, when Click turns 34. So my question is, how do you feel about the depth of this team? Because there's going to have to be rotation. You're going to have to, take risks, and guys might have to step up.
Yeah, I think this year is about trying to set some sort of platform to start building on. I would rather see this team. I would rather see this team constructed the way they are constructed right now than how I felt about this team entering last season, because I can see that there's a different thought process going on here. We have gone incredibly young. It's a risk to grab young, unproven talent, but I feel like it's, at the very least, this team has suffered for years just a lack of identity, a lack of a real plan. It's always been half measures. Like, they dip their toes in, try something for like half a season. Oh, it's not working, we're just going to yank it out. And you can't really build a consistent winner in that place. Will this team struggle? Absolutely. There are going to be some struggles this year. Like, there is a lot of young talent has to, if you're counting on, if I'm counting on Christian Fletcher, Akinbone, Jackson Hopkins, Jacob Murrell, and Jeremy Garea to suddenly play like they've never played before and become like out and out starters in this league, that's a wild expectation to have. Pirani, you could even throw in there as well. Like, I think some players are going to be given opportunities to step up. I think some will take that opportunity. I think this year playoffs, I think, should always be the goal for any MLS team. Every MLS team 1 to 29 has the talent to make the playoffs if things go right. Like, it's 9 teams make the playoffs. Playoffs should be a part of evaluating the season. If we finish 8th or 9th in this year, we have a base that we've built. We have some talent that we've cultivated, and we have 2 open DP slots entering the next year. where we can go out and get real game-changing talent that can elevate us maybe into contender status, that'll be a successful year for us. Even if we finish 10th, but we have that same thing there, I'd be perfectly fine with that. This year is going to be a lot about establishing an identity, building a base, showing that there's a plan going forward for this team. And I think that's most important.
I actually really like how your team looks as a best 11 on paper, but I do agree with the depth, and your depth piece is like you have Pedro Santos. Pedro Santos was born 1 year after me. We actually shared the same birthday. I'm no spring chicken. I cannot cut it on a field. Jared Stroud, all those young legs. Well, those young legs are 27 years old now. So I could find these spots all over the squad where there's just kind of older, outdated players, but maybe that's why you have a lot of them. Part of the Red Bull system with the press and all that is kind of no player is better than the other. And if someone goes down, next man up, how to play the system, what your responsibilities are, and maybe it's going to be a strength in numbers thing. So I do like DC. I may be leaving a little higher, Ted, than you are this year on them.
I've been hurt too many times. Let me just tell you, there's too much pain in this.
Look, all I can say is if Aaron Herrera gets on the ball in the wing positions and is on the field at the same time as Christian Benteke, then Christian Benteke is a Golden Boot contender. Because he's going to win everything in the air. And Aaron Herrera is a objectively great crosser of the ball. Yeah. So if those guys are on the field at the same time, watch out.
Yeah, and I guess I'm looking at Herrera in that sort of center back role. It could honestly be him on that right wing back. You could easily swap him in there. I think maybe a three center back, when maybe him as sort of a roamer where he's going to push forward when the team's in the press and then play some of those crosses. I agree. I think I'm very curious to see how he'll look for this team.
I pulled up some storylines to follow throughout the season. I think we've already touched on most of these. Does Troy Lesesne have what it takes to be coach in Major League Soccer? I think he did a pretty good job last year. He's not my favorite coach. He's not my first choice for anyone. I like him, more as an academy, a developmental guy. But I think he's proven that he deserves a shot. It wasn't going to be with Red Bull. It's with our rival. So, okay, that's fine. Does Pirani have the goods to be a true number 10? We've discussed that at length. We're going to find out. The only way to find out is to watch him play games. 3, 4, or 5-man back line. We've talked about that. I think they're going to go with a 3 or 5-man back line. However, with center back depth, if you want to play 3 center backs, you need 5 center backs on your roster. This team doesn't have 5 good center backs on your roster, so they're going to play with the men they have available. Is that fair?
They've got 6. You got Bartlett, McVeigh, Birnbaum, Akinbone, Sargis. I guess that's 5. So yeah, so you're right. So they've got 5 center backs, varying quality. A lot of the guys that maybe we're most unsure about, like your Sargis, you talked about Santos, all those guys, this is the last year of their contract. So this is really like they are, if I guarantee you, if you got Mackay in private and said, do you really want these guys here? He would say, no, absolutely not. I'd love to have these roster spots open and I could go find guys I actually want, but they're here for a year. So, builds where you're weak. And I think that's what he's done here. So
we have some comments coming up. Knifey Buckeye, who comes on the show all the time. Every episode, he's one of our biggest supporters. Just to post this comment that Cincinnati's better than New York Red Bulls. But hey, you know what? That's a click. That's a comment. That pushes us up in the algorithm. Knifey, thank you for doing your job today.
Give us Acosta back, and we'll talk maybe about. I'll agree with you there.
Rudy Sorto, what happens if this rebuild goes south real quick? Well, DC has demonstrated that they are not married to any one idea, maybe to a fault. But do you think that if this goes south, if you guys lose 12 games heading into the summer, you're a bottom 3 team in the East, are there changes made this summer, or do you think that this is a full year project?
I think there's a chance that if things are going really bad, if the vibes in the locker room are not good, you talk about Lesesne being brought in to be a locker room guy, to be a guy to kind of hold everything together. If that's not happening, then I could easily see this team, parting ways with him at some point, promoting an assistant. I would say this would have to go horribly bad on the field. I think Mackay is here and he has replaced longtime GM Dave Casper, and he is. I have to think the team has sort of talked him up. They've been stating, yes, we've been hurt before. Could they change? Sure, but I feel like this team is made this decision to go out and to commit to something that even if it doesn't work this year, and honestly, like if it goes south this year or it doesn't work, a lot of the guys, that would probably be most of your problem are on 1-year contracts. So you get almost another half of the roster that you can rebuild come next year and 2 designated player slots. So we'll see. I think it's a little bit too early to talk about that because I don't think this team is going to come out and get embarrassed this year. I don't think they're going to wow anybody. I think they're going to be fairly solid to at least stay within that sort of 9th to 12th part of the, maybe even if they're lucky 8th or 7th. I don't think this team is going to get embarrassed. But yeah, if it goes south, we'll have to wait and see if this team's old tendencies maybe come back. So I could be completely wrong mid-season, and you're welcome to bring me on and punk me for it.
Oh, we will.
Oh, certainly.
No, I like what you're saying though, because ultimately there are a lot of things that have happened with this team, but having players that can leave, that really sorts it out, allowing this team to kind of experiment with a direction, having some change in leadership too, allows you to start to work towards something. And I was looking into the stats, and I can see what you're saying about last year feeling like a waste, like nothing was accomplished. The team didn't go anywhere. The stats are so bang like average everywhere. Nothing is exceptional, and the team just really slides down. You missed the playoffs by like 2 points.
We were 9th heading into decision day, but eliminated from the playoffs in a graphic that I will cherish forever of the weirdness of MLS.
So if you guys can build towards, if this year is a year about building towards being better next year, that is a very valid and worthwhile use of your time. Yeah.
I think fans, I'm sure there will be the more casual, the fans that aren't on Twitter or on our Discords, that are talking about the team, that follow every move. I'm sure they'll say, same old DC can't make the playoffs. But I think if there is an actual foundation built and something, something there that can be built on for next year, I think it'll be a absolute breath of fresh air for a lot of fans who have really been disenchanted and really just not happy with how things have run with this team.
You see it right there. We as DVC fans at this point want progress over results. Well, yeah, progress from being really bad is being less bad. So you could not get the results.
Really just honestly, we've had years we've been okay or we've been decent, but we still have years where it's like, I just don't know what the direction you actually, what is the identity of DC? The answer is always, I don't know. They've got Wayne Rooney this year. Who knows, man? Other than that, not really much else. So for 10 years, it was Ben Olsen, was Benny Ball. That was our identity. So it's been a long time since we've been able to say, this is what DC stands for. This is what their identity is. This is what they have moving forward. So if that happens in 2024, it'll be probably one of the best years we've had in a long time.
Ted Mayer from RFK Refugees. Go check him out. The biggest podcast the biggest in the DC area. Go check it out, guys. Thank you so much, Ted, for joining us here. And thank you everyone at home for watching or listening. Thank you. This is the Designated Pundits, Major League Soccer on ID Sports.